Welcome, dear listener. Welcome to Adventures in Coffee, a podcast by Caffeine magazine, sponsored by Oatly.
Now, in this second series, Scott and I are going to explore the world of coffee for people who are curious and quite interested about what's in their daily cup.
Yes, Jules, we're all trying to learn a little bit more about where our food and drink comes from. So we made this podcast to shake the beans of the coffee world and peek behind the portafilter.
Oh, aren't you good with the puns today? I'm Jules Walker, a very proud East Londoner. Yes, I am that woman that rides a bike. Yes, I am that person that is a very everyday coffee drinker and loves it.
Now, I am Scott Bentley. I am the founder of Caffeine magazine. I'm also, if you didn't know, a freelance art director and all-round coffee dork. And Jules, in today's episode, we're going to be taking you deep into the bean. We're going to be talking about blends.
So, Scott, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've got no idea what to expect or what it is that we're going to be talking about. So, school me on blends. What does this entail?
I want to ask you one seemingly simple question. What is a single origin coffee?
A single origin coffee is a coffee that comes from one place.
Perfect. How big is that place? Are we talking a country, a region, a farm? Are we talking a part of a farm?
Can I just stick with coffee comes from one place as my answer, please?
Yeah, you can. You absolutely can. So, as an industry, I don't believe we've really locked down, what this term single origin means. And that's probably one of the reasons why you're struggling with it, because it's actually a term that most of the industry is struggling with too.
So does that mean you're going to be, taking me on a journey to understand what the term single origin actually means?
Yes, it's a story about where our obsession with this term single origin comes from. And it's also a story about blends. And also it's a story about community, language, and those problems about having a specific principle that kind of holds, a whole community together.
There is many a layer going on here.
It's the tiramisu episode again. It's layer
all over again,
and layer and layer and layer. Yes.
All right, I'm going to equate this with like Jules's cycling brain is going to switch on, where you're talking about community and identity. Kind of like the e-bike debate that happens in cycling. We're all in it together. We all love being on bikes, but there is still that constant, is it proper cycling? Is it real cycling? Does it count? That kind of vibe is what I'm getting here.
Absolutely.
But what exactly is it am I in for?
You are in for a story which is half historical deep dive and another part which is sort of more philosophical discussion.
Okay, I get the feeling that Jules is going to be taken to coffee school today.
But by the end of it, you are going to be like an A-grade student. You're going to know exactly what it is when we talk about this term, single origin.
Textbook, pen, I'm ready to go. Let's do this.
But before we get there, let's have a quick word from our sponsor.
And this is a sustainability hack brought to you by Oatly. So Scott, last week we discussed how hand washing your dishes actually uses more greenhouse gases than using a dishwasher does.
Yeah, that's true. But not everyone has got either the space or the money to buy a dishwasher.
Agree. So that's why our friends at Oatly have given us yet another sustainability hack for those that don't have dishwashers and wash their dishes by hand. So, you could do something as simple as using a bowl, like, cost you £1 down the shops. And this will actually cut your carbon impact by 130 kilograms every year. And that is about the weight of a lion. If you get, Scott, another 2 friends on board when washing up using a bowl, you'd have saved just shy of 4,000 kilos of carbon over 10 years. And that's the weight of an entire pride of lions.
That's good, isn't it? It's good. Do you know what? I've got another hack for you. Not only can I cut down my carbon footprint with a £1 bowl, I can also cut down the cost of my kids' haircuts. I can use it to put over their heads and cut round it.
Okay, Scott, I've got to ask you, how old are your kids again?
13 and 9.
Right, you're going to send a 9 and a 13-year-old kid to school with a bowl haircut.
What's wrong with that? My parents did it to me. Do you know how much a kid's haircut is these days?
Yeah, and I also know that I've got some phone calls to make at the end of this hack. And that was a sustainability hack brought to you by Oatly.
So, Jules, to start us on this journey, I want to take us back to a time before we had trendy cafes, tattoo baristas, before we had the names of farms on coffee bags. And to take us back there, I spoke to this person.
So my name is Francois Nopes. So I'm a fourth generation coffee roaster. I've got memories of my father and my grandfather before me roasting coffee. I live and work in London, where I work for a company called Perky Blenders in East London. And I'm the head roaster and the green coffee buyer for the company.
That's really interesting. You say that your family have all been coffee roasters as well. It's quite a niche thing for you all to be involved in. How was that as a child?
I've got those early memories of like playing in my dad's roastery. And, you know, in roasteries, you've got like huge piles of coffee bags. And then I remember I was jumping from one to the other. So that's my earliest memory as a child from the roastery.
That's quite lovely, actually.
So Francois' great-grandfather began this coffee roastery in the south of Belgium in 1936.
Oh, wow.
And then his granddad took over in 1958. And recently, he found this amazing little time capsule that gives us this lovely window into the world of coffee roasting back there in Belgium 50 years ago.
Oh, a coffee time capsule. I like this. I open it.
So when my grandfather passed away, we went to his house and then we had a look at, you know, all the books and all the piles and, you know, like many years of like stuff that's been accumulated. And then we found a notepad actually. And in that notepad, we found actually the recipes of like the blends that they were using back then.
I love this stuff. Genuinely, I love this because it makes me think of like digging through my own family history, but a family history that involves like coffee and generational stories and notepads. This is what I'm hearing, Scott, the notepads.
Yeah, do you want to see them, Jules? Do you want to see the notepads?
Yes, open the notepads for me, please. Oh, this is genuinely beautiful. I don't speak French, but it's actually beautiful handwriting that looks like it's been done in like a fountain pen or some ink-based pen like that. And it's like an old school text school book. Do you know what I mean? Just like an exercise book that's got these notes in it. And it's, you know, everything's sectioned off. You know, looks like there's part 1, part 2, part 3, like of, I'm guessing,
blends.
ingredients.
No, they're the blends.
This is fascinating. This is really like a window on a coffee history.
Okay, souvent le consommer à la condition d'être doux. C'est un café léger.
So Jules, like you, I don't speak French, but I thought what I'd do is get Francois to kind of like read out some of the things on these notepads to you
Colombie,
in this beautiful,
parfumé,
seductive French accent.
Avec un excellent arôme.
I thought you might like this.
Thank you. I appreciate this already.
Guatemala, doux et parfumé, bon pour mélange.
And these are the coffees that Francois' granddad was sourcing. These are the coffees he was selling to his community.
Java, goût prononcé, bon pour mélange, avec café doux, Santos par exemple, tout indiqué lorsque le café doit être fini avec de la crème de lait.
Are you a bit jelly-kneed there, Jules?
It genuinely does just sound lovely.
Beautiful.
Yeah, there were some words that I could sort of pick out, like perfumey and what have you, and it just I don't know, it just sounds deliciously descriptive.
So I asked Francois to translate these coffee blends and tell us, what was his granddad putting in them? You know, what was he selling to his community at that time?
Number 1 is a Santos coffee with Robusta. Number 2 is Santos coffee with Arabica, so it's quite nondescript. And then number 3 is Brazil Santos on its own. Number 4 is a Santos, again, it's always the same Santos, extra prime, so I'm not too sure what that means, with Colombia.
Now, what I'm getting from that is that there weren't many coffees in his range. And I need to know what Santos is. What's this Santos that I keep on hearing?
You've kind of hit the nail on the head, and also for me as this sort of specialty coffee nerd who likes to know where everything comes from, it just comes across as so generic. I mean, there's literally a handful of coffees mentioned there. You know, there's nothing on here that tells us who the farmer is, what region it's from. I mean, literally, Santos is the name of a port.
Okay.
It's just a shipping port.
Okay.
The Brazil Santos was basically a big mishmash of like a lot of coffee produced in Brazil.
So imagine this. You're a farmer, you're in Brazil, You're, hundreds of miles away on this plateau. You've got this beautiful farm. You're picking these really lovely cherries, these really lovely coffees. And it then gets blended with the coffee on the farm nearby. And then it goes down somewhere else and it gets blended in with another load of coffees. And finally it gets taken to the port with loads of other coffees from loads of other places and just gets bunged in again. And there it is. That's Santos coffee for you.
So even though different coffees, different farmers, different growers, it all just gets lost, blended and labelled, and it's Santos. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely, Jules. And, what's really interesting is that, these coffees, they just really didn't taste that great compared to today's standards.
Coffees were just not as good as they are today. I mean, probably some coffees were produced decently but then even then, like I think overall the quality of the coffees that roasters were using back then was lower.
Imagine this. You're a farmer, you've got a piece of land, you're making some great coffee, you're putting lots of time and energy into it, and then it's just getting blended up with loads of other coffees from loads of other farms. Maybe they haven't got such great coffee. So that great coffee that you were growing just gets kind of diluted down and, just gets lost. And, the whole thing, it just becomes a numbers game. So look, Jules, this is the state of play. There's like mediocre coffee everywhere. Things are getting blended before they even get to the ship. What does this mean for Francois' granddad? Picture this scene, the ship is coming in from Santos or something like that, and it's docking in Antwerp, and along the side there's all the coffee roasters, and they're all just getting coffee from the same lot. This is all just the same coffee that they're getting.
When you think about it, everyone was kind of roasting the same coffee. You didn't know, Everyone was using Brazil Santos. Everyone. Every single roaster.
I mean, can you see the problem for someone like Francois' granddad?
Well, yeah. I mean, if it's a small coffee community and you've got the three roasters getting exactly the same coffees to then roast up and sell, what makes you different from John down the road? There's nothing to distinguish you as a roaster if you've all got the same thing.
Absolutely. You all have the same coffee. It all basically tastes the same. And it's pretty underwhelming compared to what we get today. So the way in which you distinguish yourself is what Francois' granddad does.
So what ultimately the roasters were doing is they're trying to achieve more complexity. So because they were using more modest ingredients, the reason why they were mixing a coffee from Mocha with a coffee from Santos and a coffee from Colombia is because they wanted to achieve just more complexity in the final cup. And that was very much like the craft of the roaster back then. It was not only being able to know when, your coffee is cooked to perfection and roasted to perfection, but it was also knowing which coffee is going to complement which one and create something that it's more interesting.
This is good because this is sounding like being like a chef.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's talent.
Absolutely. It's very much what your mum does in the kitchen. She's got her own understanding of what spices to put with what things because it's her thing. So this is the same here with the coffee roasters. It's, blending different origins, blending different coffees becomes this skill. So, Jules, I don't know if you remember when you were going all giddy over Francois' beautiful French.
Shut up. But it's true.
That's essentially Colonel Sanders standing up and giving you his secret recipe to Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Damn.
This was my assumption, so I asked this question to him. Were these recipes, kept secret? Was everyone allowed to see these?
No. Oh no. That's why they were in a notepad. And I guess the notepad must have been in like some sort of drawer, like you close with a key or something like that. Just traditionally, I think most roasters in Europe were keeping their recipes secret.
Yeah, I get like closely guarded. Of course, it would be closely guarded.
So this was the old world of coffee. Everything was a blend. Things were blended at origin. Things were blended before they got to the port. Things were blended by roasters. Everything was a blend.
Yeah.
But then something happened. And it happened as Francois' father was taking over the roastery from his grandfather. A little revolution happened in the world of coffee.
So my father took over the business in 1980. I think he worked pretty much like my grandfather for the first 10 years until 1990. And then in 1990, you had a bit of a revolution within what was called then the specialty coffee movement. I remember my father went to the US for a trip, and then when he came back, he was like, wow, it's incredible. Like the market in the US is so totally different from the market in Europe. And so, the coffee world is moving and we need to move with it.
So when Francois' father came back from the US, he kind of understood that people were starting to become more interested in the terroir. Essentially where this coffee has come from.
First, you had the Brazil Santos, and then everything was mixed. So maybe some of those coffees were exceptional, and some of those coffees were very mediocre. And then you blended everything together, and it was quite generic. And then suddenly people realized, well, maybe coffees from this specific region in that country are actually tasting a little bit better than in other regions. And people started getting that, the same thing you get in wine with terroirs, people saying oh yeah, I really like coffees from not just this country, but that specific terroir in this country.
And this was a bit of a moment of revelation. It's like the whole thing where, we've done in previous episodes, when you put two coffees side by side, you kind of go, they're different.
Yes.
And this one over here is much better.
Yeah.
So imagine there's all these coffee professionals around the world and they're starting to taste more and more specific, lots of coffee. Yeah. And this moment of revelation happens. It's almost this aha moment. And this is also what happened to Francois.
And I remember that one coffee that really opened my eyes. That was an Ethiopian coffee from the region of Harar. And it had that incredible blueberry taste. And that was the first time in my life where I could taste so much fruit in the coffee. And that's really when I started thinking, wow, there's so much more to coffee than, what we all used to.
Well, it's like a eureka moment there, isn't it? There's a whole world of coffee out there. There's a whole world that needs to be explored.
Absolutely. So naturally, this is what happened.
Some of those coffees would taste so much better than others. And so they needed to keep them separate so they could sell them and create a new market for higher and higher quality. And this went up and up and up and up to the point where now we're talking about, all those super incredible nanolots that are selling for just 50 kilos of coffee. It's tiny, tiny.
Okay, so we touched upon this in our very first episode, didn't we? When we were having the discussion about me getting a geisha coffee and the absolutely kind of insane prices that people pay for them.
Yeah.
And I guess, Scott, the reason why people pay these insane prices for something like geisha coffee is because it's the opposite of blending. I mean, you're actually drilling down to something very specific here. So it's the specific plants that are grown in that place which produce especially amazing flavors. So it's the singularity of it. It's the nicheness of it.
Absolutely, Jules. And, this is essentially what the specialty coffee movement is all about. It's about getting, more specific. So, Jules, I want to just sort of start to, pull all this together because I think this is where the problem lies in our industry. We're kind of at this sort of crossroads. Should we embrace blends or not? Because for so long now in specialty coffee, blends have been seen as a bit of a dirty word. It doesn't have the terroir, it doesn't have the badge of honor, it doesn't have this nano lot thing attached to it. It can't command these hugely high prices anymore. Some of these roasters, they're all bought in on single origin, so there might be some shade being thrown around here.
And then sometimes coffee roasters are using blends to basically use their old past crop coffees or their coffees that are fading, just to make them move very quickly.
As a coffee roaster, you can get away with bulking up coffee blends with let's just call it below par coffees, something which is not interesting, but is going to get a job done. So the specialty coffee movement started looking down at blends, started saying if it's a blend, it's not very good. And there are many coffee roasters around the world that have now decided they're not doing blends. Blends are bad, single origin is good. This is the polar views that this movement currently seems to have. My problem with that idea, with that ideology, is that, in my view, and I think there's a case to be made, that all coffee is a blend of some sorts. And this is what I want to get to next. Where does the blend begin and where does it end?
Okay, this now sounds like it is getting way more philosophical than expected, but I'm ready. Let's dork up and just get deep into the weeds of coffee and blends.
Now, I want to just bring James, our producer, in here because he was also on this call with me to Victor Robello, who is a Nicaraguan farmer.
Yeah, so Jules, Scott and I, we jumped on this call with Victor.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Victor Robello from Nicaragua. I'm third generation of coffee business family.
Now, I've been to this part of Nicaragua where Victor's farm is. Imagine these rolling hills and these giant trees that kind of burst through the forest canopy. Imagine like these really tall people, you know, standing in a crowd of like shorter people and like stretching out their arms above everybody's heads. So what I did with Victor is I was like, okay, let's zoom into a pair of those coffee trees side by side.
Okay.
They're like, you know, brother and sister, the same variety, right next door to each other under the shade of one of those, you know, giant trees above. And I asked Victor this question. Would you agree that like each tree in your farm has a slightly unique flavor compared to another tree?
They're all different. They're all different, but to be very honest, I have never copped one tree by tree.
So even though the trees are on the same plot of land, each tree is going to have its own unique, different flavour to it.
I don't think this is too much of a stretch to say that, you know, one tree might have got a little bit more nutrients.
Right.
It might have had a little bit more sun.
Yeah.
I'm not saying these differences are big, but I'm saying theoretically each tree can produce fruit that tastes different to its neighbouring tree, even though it's genetically, you know, essentially the same.
Yeah.
So let me now take you to my next question for Victor, which leads us into a philosophical quagmire.
Right.
If you were to cup every tree, hypothetically, it would taste different. Hypothetically, right?
Yes.
Right. So as soon as you add a second tree, let's say you have all the coffee from one tree. Now, let's add the coffee from a second tree. That is a blend.
That would be a blend if you have a different variety.
Oh. What? Okay, what's your definition of a blend?
It has to be variety, a different genetic variety.
Okay, I wasn't expecting that as the answer.
If I'm reading this right, I think what Victor is trying to say is that if you mix the cherries from two coffee trees that are essentially identical in their genetics, that's not a blend. You know, and I can understand why he comes to that conclusion, because most people are not going to be able to tell these apart.
But Jules, there is a logical inconsistency with this approach. Imagine one of the mountains on Victor's farm covered in coffee trees. They're all the same variety of coffee. But let's say there's 100 meters difference in elevation between the ones at the top of the mountain and the one at the bottom of the mountain. Now, you could take the trees at the top of the mountain and call that a nanolot. And you could also take the trees at the bottom of the mountain and call that a nanolot. But what Victor is saying, though, is if you were to blend those two nanolots together, you shouldn't call that a blend?
What does it actually mean to blend coffee then? If what is a blend? I need to know what a blend is.
That is the question, Jules. That is the question. And you know, Jules, while I was asking these questions to Victor, I was thinking to myself, am I completely wrong with this? I mean, does the rest of the industry have an answer? So what I did is a few weeks ago, I went with Scott to Cafe Culture, which is a B2B industry trade show for the coffee world here in London. So what happened, right? I was walking around and I found people who work in the green bean space. And I asked them that same question. Two trees. Combine the beans from two trees. Is that a blend? If you mix those two coffee trees together, would that be a blend?
Yes.
No. Yes. No. I suppose it is, but it isn't.
Very good question. In reality, it actually is.
Mixed those two beans from those two trees together.
Yeah.
Would that be a blend?
It's just a simple yes or no, is it? No.
Why not?
It's a very good question. put me on the spot. No, because it'd be a single farm coffee, so you wouldn't think of it as a blend. Otherwise, every coffee is a blend in the world, isn't it? So,
Isn't it?
exactly. So you could, yeah. So if this is really difficult. Why did you have to catch me at 5 o'clock on Friday? That was really unfair of you. They're all blends. I changed my mind. They're all blends. Yeah, even different branches. One bean from one branch, one bean from the other makes a blend.
There is no simple answer to this. There's a lot of conflicting answers about what is a blend, what doesn't make a blend. If it comes from the same farm, it can't be a blend, but it can be a blend because it's two different trees.
There is no consensus at all.
We broke the coffee well.
So, Jules, as you can probably tell, Scott and I are, very chuffed for smashing this term single origin. So it's like a million pieces of glass on the floor. Now, what I'm going to do is get a hammer. I'm going to smash it a little bit further. I'm going to smash these into microscopic shards. So while I was at Cafe Culture, I caught up with this person called Laura.
So my name is Laura Elsa Meunier, and I work for Ensambles Cafés Mexicanos. So it's a Mexican green coffee company that sources and exports green coffee to Europe.
And she basically shone a light on what has been an open secret in this industry for a very long time.
This is one of the first things I actually realized when I started working in El Salvador, is that when I arrived there, I had that conception that a lot of coffees were unique in the sense that they were like single origin or single producer or single something. And then I realized when I got there that actually to even make like a 10-bag lot, usually because coffee farmers in the world are very small scale, they don't produce that amount of coffee themselves in their own farms. So you need to blend coffees together to be able to make decent volumes for export.
Okay, so she's in the coffee industry. She was under the impression that it was going to be, the whole thing with the single origin, the specialty coffees, how these are done. And then even her eyes are opened up to the fact that in order to make the amounts of coffee that they need to produce, you still have to blend it with others. So I don't know, that sort of level of purity that people talk about or is perceived to exist in coffee is kind of smashed to pieces because it still has to be a blend.
Absolutely, Jules. And if you go to Africa, things get even more extreme. Generally speaking, farms are generally quite large in Central and South America. If you go to a farm in Ethiopia, Rwanda, places like that, farms are much smaller. I mean, much, much smaller. So they're not making 600 kilos of coffee per season. I mean, they'll be lucky to make 60. Or maybe even less than that. So when you see a single origin on a bag of coffee that comes from an African country, that's actually more likely to be the mill, not the farm.
Oh,
and there is a mill where many, many farmers bring their coffee and they sell their cherries and they get a price for those cherries. And that is then sold as a single origin.
Yes, it's a whole element of scale. When you think about the scale of coffees that these farms need to produce, and if the farm only produces like 60 kilos of beans or something like that, this then makes sense for it to be blended with other beans to get to the scale that they need. So blends are all right. I mean, why don't we just blend everything? We can take different coffees from different regions, put them together. It's going to be fantastic. Just stop the episode here. I think that's it.
So, Jules, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to just burst your bubble for a moment. The thing is, you could, in theory, you're allowed to do that. But I also met this guy at the show.
My name is Akshay. I run Moolabani Estate in Coog, India with my wife Komal.
So Akshay, he's, a fifth-generation coffee farmer with his partner in southern India. And he shared this really insightful story.
When we first started, about 3 years ago, one of the roasters who purchased from us in India wanted to blend it. And that was very, very sad.
What was the problem for you that you were being blended with other Indian coffees?
So, is my coffee not good enough on its own that it needs to be mixed with something else?
See, I could feel that. Because that's a shame. You're doing this. This is your thing. And then it almost feels like someone's saying, no, it's not making the grade. We need to mix it with something else. I can understand why he would be offended.
Right. But the thing is, there are many instances where his coffee does get blended and he doesn't care.
Oh, okay.
Because the thing is, coffee farms produce, a whole shade of qualities, from the mind-blowing to the very forgettable.
But you surely must create coffees on your farms that, probably can't stand alone as a single origin.
100%.
So what do you do with those?
At the moment, we've been selling it to the commodity market,
Which go into blends.
which go into blends. But we don't. It's not our names on it, essentially. So I'm very vested with the coffees I personally process for the specialty market.
So you're saying that you went out one day and got this lot of coffee, right, off the trees, processed it, and sold it to a roaster in India, and you were like, this lot of coffee, right, comes from our farm, we're really proud of it, show it by itself. And then they blended it.
Yes, it did.
And then, but on that same day, you had coffees which weren't as so good, because all farmers do different levels, and that went to a commodity market, you were anonymous, and you don't care anymore.
Correct. That's right.
It's very eye-opening, that's for sure, because just, one end of the coffee crop scale for him, he has the crop that he's super, super proud of. And, it's a bit crappy if they want to blend it and what have you. But then on the other end, it's just like, yeah, this isn't actually that good after all. I don't know. It almost feels like maybe I'm getting too deep with this, or maybe I'm getting too confused. But there's this whole thing of being very proud of something, and then it's sort of like, actually, nah, you can do whatever you want with that. My name's not going to be attached to it, so it doesn't matter.
Right. So essentially, my read on this is that it comes down to the farmer. Yes, everything is a blend, but some farmers don't want you to blend because they're really proud of what they made. So let's not blend those coffees.
Right.
And sometimes they're happy for you to blend those coffees. And you do blend them. And you make something that's probably greater than the sum of its parts.
Right, okay. Right, James, I just have to ask you, right, if blending between small farmers is often called something like a single origin, or, your regional blend, or the Columbia coffee or something like that, what do you actually call a coffee from a single coffee grower?
Jules,
help me.
It's a hot mess.
See, I didn't want to be the one to say that, but that's what I was thinking. This is turning into a hot mess.
Akshay basically said the same thing.
I mean, this is a very great topic. It's extremely great, right? So, a single origin means different for different people. Single origin could be an entire region, but for me, single estate is probably easier.
So, Akshay prefers the term single estate.
Right.
Maybe the sexy name for this is like single producer lot. So Jules, where are you landing now? What have you taken away from this rambling coffee dork club thing that James and I have taken you on? I feel sorry for you in some ways, and we'll give you your money back if you didn't.
If I'm not pleased, yeah. In all honesty, my overarching thing that I take away from it is that sometimes it's good to blend coffees and sometimes it isn't.
Does that hurt though, Jules?
Why did it hurt?
Well, sitting on the fence that much, does it hurt sitting on the fence that much?
Oh, you should have just asked me if I needed some tweezers to pull out the splinters, and then I would have known exactly what you meant. I am now left whirring around thinking about the term single origin.
Yeah.
But I want to know now, what are we actually supposed to do with the term single origin in coffee? So when you go into the supermarket and you see that it's a single origin coffee from a particular country, does that hold any weight? What are we supposed to do with this now? I want to hear this from you.
I think the problem with single origin is a marketing term which has been used and abused by people throughout the years. And I just really think that when we see it, it should prompt us all to ask a question. How big is that single origin? So if I go to my local supermarket and I see single origin Colombian coffee, what you're essentially saying is all the beans in this bag are from Colombia, but I'm going to use this tag of single origin as some kind of like premium label. The thing is, it's no different to the original Santos coffee. All it's saying is it came from a country. Now, if it has the name of a farm, you know that that coffee is going to be grown possibly by, one family, one company maybe. If it's like a micro lot, then you know that that coffee is not only going to come from one farm, but also one part of the farm. And then maybe a nano lot, that's going to come from even smaller part of that farm. And as you get smaller, these coffees will be treated more delicately, and they will be looked after, and they'll be separated. And this is why they're quite often more premium. So really, I think that's it. I think just ask the question. If you see single origin, just ask, how big's that origin? Is it really any different to Santos coffee?
It's just quite deep, but it does give you like food for thought when you are looking at your coffee in the supermarket.
Can I just add? I do have a challenge to everybody out there. Jules, do you have coffee beans in your kitchen right now?
I do.
I have a way for you to taste the purest essence of a coffee's terroir and the date it was picked and processed.
Okay.
Pick one bean and brew that one bean by itself.
A singular bean. Brew a singular bean for... Right, okay.
Does it get more pure than that?
right. Do you know what? Enough. I'm off to go and maybe have a look at some coffee bags in my kitchen, but let's just roll the credits.
This podcast was produced by James Harper, the creator of the coffee podcast Filter Stories, who you also heard in this episode.
Yay! And he also plays and tinkles those ivories that you hear in the background. Now, if you like the show, press the subscribe button on your podcast app. Go on, press it now. Just tap, press it, hit it.
And also, please do leave a review on Apple Podcasts, because this actually helps the algorithm recommend our show to other people.
Now, you can follow Caffeine Magazine on Instagram. That will be the coffee dork himself, Scott, at Caffeine Mag, myself, Jules, at Lady Vello, and James Harper at Filter Stories Podcast. And we've put links to everybody who has been on the show on social media.
Now, you can also pick up the latest issue of Caffeine Magazine at the Manchester Coffee Festival, or you can head over to our website, caffeinemag.com, if you want to pick a copy up now.
Now, in our next episode, we are going to be bringing you another one of our adventures in your kitchen. Right, I'm going. It's getting lower.
Keep going.
It's getting lower.
All the way. We're going to help you brew a filter coffee using an AeroPress.
Locked and loaded.
Whack it on the mug.
Whacked. Oh yes, we're going to get you to the point where you will be competing at the World AeroPress Championships.
And that is a thing.
Right, but until then, take care of yourselves and we will speak to you again in a couple of weeks.
Bye.